two armies faced each other under the scorching Balkan sun, and both their rulers would be dead by sundown. One had crossed mountains and rivers from Asia to conquer Christian Europe. The other was fighting not just for his land, but for the survival of a people, a legacy, a memory. The Battle of Kosovo, fought on the 15th of June, 1389, has nuclear victor. Only a graveyard of illusions. Sultan Murad, the first and only Ottoman ruler to die in battle. Prince Lazar, the last great hope of a fragmented Serbian realm, both struck down in the same day, on the same bloody field. So, was Kosovo a victory? Or a tragedy that neither side could afford? This is the story of a battle that has become more than history, a myth, a weapon, and a memory still capable of igniting fires in the heart of Europe. But before Kosovo became a symbol, it was the end of a 1,000-year-old order. The year was 1371, and the once mighty Serbian Empire, carved by the sword of Stefan Dusan, collapsed not in flames, but in silence. The twin deaths of King Vukašin Mrnjavčević and his brother Uglesha at the Battle of Maritsa left the empire decapitated. Only a few months later, Emperor Uroš V remembered bitterly as the weak died childless. With his death, the ancient Nemanjić dynasty, which had ruled the Serbs for over 200 years, ceased to exist. What followed was not a succession, but disintegration. Local lords declared autonomy. Noblemen carved their own domains. The empire became a patchwork, and patchworks don't survive invasions. To the east, the Ottomans under Sultan Murad had already crossed the Dardanelles into Europe. But instead of crushing the Christian lords one by one, Murad chose a slower, more insidious strategy. He offered peace in exchange for vassalship. One by one, Balkan rulers submitted. The Dejanović family in eastern Serbia, the boyars of Bulgaria, even the remnants of Byzantium, desperate behind the walls of Constantinople. It was not conquest. It was corrosion. And yet, in the West, one prince still resisted, Prince Marko, son of the fallen king Vukašin, refused to bow at first. But with his forces shattered at Maritsa, his lands were picked apart by rival Serbian lords. Out of desperation, he too accepted Ottoman suzerainty. Thus, by diplomacy and tribute, Murad secured peace and, more importantly, footholds. With each vassal came tribute gold that funded new campaigns, and with each fortress came staging points, beachheads for future conquest into the heart of Europe. But peace would not last forever. In the ruins of the Serbian Empire, a new power was rising. In the north, Prince Lazar Rebeljanovich, once a minor noble, began consolidating power. After the fall of the Mrnjavčević family, Lazar took advantage of the vacuum. With the support of his son-in-law, Vuk Branković, he captured Skopje, once the imperial capital. In 1373, Lazar struck decisively. Together with Ban Tvrtko I of Bosnia and the Hungarian noble Nicholas Garai, he launched a joint campaign against the rival Prince Nikola Altomanovich. Outnumbered and encircled, Nikola was defeated, and his lands were divided. Lazar grew in wealth, troops, and ambition. In 1379, he added the region of Braničevo, rich in minerals. Boosting his economy and war capacity, he now claimed the title Autocrat of all Serbs, a bold claim for fragmented land. To the west, his ally Tvrtko had similar ambitions. In 1377, Tvrtko crowned himself King of Serbs in Bosnia. not in a palace but in the Miloševa monastery, the resting place of Saint Sava. This was more than ambition. It was symbolism. Two men, two crowns, two visions of unity. But for now, still allies, bound by politics. In the looming shadow from the east, for while the Christian lords consolidated, Sultan Murad was preparing for war. In 1380, Ottoman raiding parties began to pierce deeper into Christian lands, not to conquer, but to disrupt, scout, and instill fear. Bulgaria bore the brunt. The valleys south of the Balkan mountains were ravaged, but in 1381, one raiding party pushed too far into Lazar's territory. There, at the Battle of Dubrovnica, Lazar's voivodes struck back and won. It was a warning, but not a deterrent. In 1383, the Ottomans captured Seres, a vital city in Macedonia. In 1385, they seized Sofia, opening the gates to Serbia. Then, in 1386, came the first major assault. The Ottomans took Niš, the gateway to Lazar's domain, and advanced toward Kruševac, his capital. But Lazar was ready. At the Battle of Pločnik, his forces dealt a severe blow to the invading army, halting their advance. Flush with victory, Bulgaria's emperor Ivan Shishman stopped paying tribute to Murad. He hoped the tide had turned. He was wrong. In retaliation, the Ottomans invaded Bulgaria again with overwhelming force. By the end, Ivan was forced to become a vassal once more. The Sultan had learned, if he wanted to end resistance, he had to cut off its head. And that head was now clearly Prince Lazar. By 1387, it was no longer a question of whether war would return to the Balkans, but when and how devastating it would be. In the city of Thessaloniki, a jewel of Byzantium, the bells of the churches were silenced forever. The Ottomans had taken the city that year, a brutal reminder that no stronghold was beyond their reach. The second city of the Eastern Roman Empire had fallen, and yet the Balkan nobles still clung to autonomy. Sultan Murad, I saw clearly that plundering would no longer suffice. Lazar's Serbia, though, smaller than Dušan's old empire, was militarily organized, economically resilient, and politically assertive. And it was now the only real Christian power left that could mount a credible defense. In the summer of 1388, Murad sent a probing force under the seasoned commander Lala Shahin Pasha. His aim was subtle: destabilize, intimidate, and test Lazar's alliances. But he made a critical misstep. Shahin Pasha marched through the lands of Ottoman vassals, Prince Marko and Konstantin Dejanović, carefully avoiding them to strike at Bosnia, a move meant to sideline Lazar's key ally. What he did not anticipate was the fury of Voivode Vlatko Vuković. Under the Bosnian banner, Vuković met the Ottomans head-on and crushed them. Shahin barely escaped alive. It was a resounding humiliation, not only militarily, but politically. The Balkan Christians were not yet broken. And worse, they were learning to work together. From Murad's perspective, the time had come to finish this rebellion once and for all. He could no longer tolerate a powerful, defiant Serbia to the west. He would bring overwhelming force with troops from both the European and Asian parts of the empire, a multi-ethnic army raised not only to destroy, but to send a message. And so, in 1389, the Sultan marched with his two sons, Yakub Çelebi and Bayezid, a royal campaign, a campaign to conquer or be remembered. On the Christian side, Prince Lazar had no illusions. He knew Murad was coming, and he knew he would need every ally, every sword, every favor called in Despite earlier tension with Hungary, he sought peace with King Sigismund. By 1387, it was clear that the Balkan resistance had grown teeth. The Ottoman defeat at Plochnik, the Serbian Bosnian victory against Shahin Pasha, these were not just isolated successes. They were symbolic. They proved that the Sultan could bleed. In the eyes of Christian Europe, a fragile hope was rekindled that the Ottomans were not invincible, that unity, even if temporary, might hold back the tide from the east. But Sultan Murad, I was not a man to leave threats unchecked. His vassals were restless. Tribute was faltering. Even within the Ottoman court, whispers grew louder questioning his authority after multiple defeats in the Balkans. Murad knew the answer was not more raids, but a decisive campaign, not another border skirmish, but a clash of civilizations. And so he began to prepare for total war. Thousands of troops were raised not just from Anatolia, but from recently subjugated territories in Thrace and Macedonia. From both continents of his empire, Europe and Asia, Murad summoned men, weapons, and resolve. He brought with him his two sons, Yakup Çelebi, born of a noble mother, a careful and dutiful commander, Bayezid, later nicknamed Yildirim the Thunderbolt, for reasons that would soon become clear. The Sultan marched north, but he did not attack the rebellious lords like Prince Marko or Constantine Dehanovic, now vassals of the Ottoman crown. Instead, he passed through their territories unopposed, marching straight for the one man who dared to stand against him, Prince Lazar. And Lazar did not wait. He too began assembling his forces. He called on his closest ally, King Tvrtko of Bosnia, who responded by sending his finest commander, Vlatko Vukovic, veteran of earlier victories, Lazar's son-in-law. Vuk Brankovic brought his own seasoned warriors from Kosovo, a region he governed with martial discipline. Smaller Christian contingents from Albania, Wallachia, Croatia, and possibly Hungary answered the call, but their numbers were likely symbolic mercenaries, adventurers, knights with something to prove or atone for. This was not a crusade. It was a last stand, and Lazar knew unity was fleeting. His relations with Hungary were strained. He had meddled in the Hungarian Civil War against King Sigismund, and now, even in the face of Ottoman invasion, Hungary watched from the sidelines. Lazar also had to contend with domestic politics. He was not king. He had no imperial bloodline. His authority rested on his alliances, not divine, right? But in the face of an existential threat, he marched. By early June 1389, both armies advanced toward the same location, a place both symbolic and strategic, the field of Kosovo Polje, a wide, flat plain outside the town of Pristina, once a vital trade route, now a killing ground. On June Kings, 1389, under a brutal summer sun, two armies faced one another. The Ottoman formation was textbook for its time. Archers in the front, their job, provoke. Behind them, the Zeb infantry light and maneuverable, but expandable. On the flanks, the Akinji light cavalry fast and suited for flanking attacks. Behind them, the elite Sipahi heavy cavalry feudal knights of the Ottoman realm. In the center, the Janissaries surrounding the Sultan, guarding not just his life, but the core of the empire. Murad positioned Yaqub to the left, Bayezid to the right. Across the field, Prince Lazar mirrored this structure, but with a distinctly European flavor. His heavy cavalry, the pride of medieval warfare, stood in front, gleaming under the morning light, likely supported by lighter cavalry on the wings. Behind them, Serbian and Bosnian infantry, possibly peasants and mercenaries, armed with spears, axes, and the will to survive. Lazar took the center, Vlatko Vukovic commanded the left, Vuk Brankovic the right. In theory, Lazar's troops were outnumbered. Sources estimate 20,000 Christian soldiers versus 30,000 Ottomans. But they were better equipped, better fed, and perhaps more desperate. Lazar's plan was simple and violent. Use the crushing charge of heavy cavalry to break the Ottoman lines, force panic, collapse the flanks. It had worked before, but Murad knew this. He was counting on it. A had dug in. Rows of sharpened stakes lined the front to slow cavalry. Archers would loose volleys to disrupt cohesion. Then infantry would absorb the charge. And only then would Bayezid and Yaqub launch the counterattack. At dawn, Ottoman artillery opened the battle, but their shots were ineffective. Moments later, the archers stepped forward. A hail of arrows rained down on Lazar's cavalry, largely ineffective against their heavy armor, but psychologically jarring. Then came the order. The earth shook as thousands of hooves thundered across Kosovo field. The Serbian and Bosnian cavalry crashed into the Ottoman line like a tidal wave of steel, and they broke through. Lazar's center surged forward. His left wing under Vukovic began pushing the Turks back. But the real damage came on the right, where Vuk Brankovic's cavalry tore through Yaqub's flank, driving deep into the Ottoman formation. Yaqub's troops bent, then buckled. Some accounts say they were driven all the way back to the Ottoman camp. This was the turning point. And then something happened that no army could have prepared for. A group of Serbian knights, perhaps led by a man named Miloš Obilić, broke through the chaos and reached the Sultan's tent, surrounded by camels and guards. The tent was supposed to be untouchable. But according to one source, a letter from Bosnian King Tvrtko to the city of Florence, one of these knights cut down Sultan Murad in the midst of battle. A stunning act of bravery or assassination, depending on who you ask. The Sultan, the unifier of the Ottoman Empire in Europe, was dead. And yet, the Ottomans did not collapse. In a medieval battle, the death of a sovereign was often the signal for retreat or total collapse. But the Ottomans were different. Discipline had been drilled into their ranks, orders delegated, succession prepared with brutal efficiency. According to multiple Ottoman sources, as soon as news of Sultan Murad's death reached the command staff, Bayezid, already commanding the right wing, acted without hesitation. He summoned his brother Yaqub Çelebi under the pretense of consultation. And when Yaqub arrived, Bayezid had him strangled by palace guards. Within hours, Bayezid proclaimed himself Sultan, even as arrows still flew across the Kosovo sky. This moment, cold, calculated, ruthless, would define Bayezid's rule, and it would earn him his nickname, Yildirim, the Thunderbolt. With his brother dead and command unified, Bayezid launched a devastating counterattack, while the Serbian right wing, led by Vuk Brankovic, had broken through Yaqub's forces and reached the Ottoman camp. The tide was now turning. Vlatko Vukovic's left flank, which had pushed hard early on, was now isolated. Bayezid deployed his Sipahi cavalry, and they smashed into the Bosnian left with unrelenting force. The Christian flank began to collapse. Meanwhile, as Brankovic saw the center faltering, he made a fateful decision. He initiated an organized withdrawal. Was it treason, cowardice, or cold military logic? To this day, historians disagree. Some Serbian epics accuse Brankovic of betrayal, abandoning Lazar on the field. Others argue that with Murad dead and the center crumbling, he preserved what he could of his forces. Whatever the truth, The result was the same. Lazar was now alone, trapped in the center, with Branković's right wing gone and Vukovic's left collapsing. Prince Lazar had no escape. He either fell in battle, or as Ottoman chronicles claim, was captured and beheaded after the fight. His body, broken and bloodied, would become a relic of martyrdom in Serbian memory. As for Bayezid, he did not pursue the retreating Christians. He had just seized supreme power, and his first task was not vengeance, but consolidation. He withdrew from the battlefield, took his father's body, and returned south to be enthroned. Still, news of Sultan Murad's death spread quickly, and not just in the Ottoman Empire. In Florence, in Rome, and in Hungary, messengers delivered stunning reports. The Ottoman Sultan is dead. The Serbs stood their ground. King Tvrtko of Bosnia proudly claimed victory. After all, most of his troops had returned home alive. His forces had fought valiantly. The Sultan was dead. Surely, this was a triumph. But for Moravian Serbia, the cost was devastating. With Prince Lazar's death, power fell to his widow, Princess Milica. Her son, Stefan Lazarevich, was still a boy, barely a teenager. The army was broken, the coffers depleted, and worse, from the north, Hungary now saw weakness. In autumn of 1389, Hungarian forces invaded Serbia not to liberate, but to plunder. They ravaged the countryside, besieged towns, and stripped the land of what little remained. Milica had no choice. To prevent further devastation, she submitted to Ottoman suzerainty. As a pledge of loyalty, she sent her youngest daughter to Bayezid's harem, a political marriage designed to buy time and peace. This was not surrender. It was survival. Lazar's once proud realm, so close to halting the Ottomans, was now a vassal. Only Vuk Branković resisted. Having preserved much of his army, he fortified his territories and refused Bayezid's demands. For the next decade, he would fight a losing war, until his eventual capture and imprisonment. Kosovo had not ended the resistance, but it decapitated its leadership, and the Ottomans, they paused, but they did not stop. By 1390, Bayezid was once again campaigning in the Balkans. This time, Serbian vassals fought on his side against Hungary, Albania, and their former Christian allies. The tragedy of Kosovo was complete. Those who had once stood against the Ottomans now bled for them. The legacy of the battle, however, would outlive the soldiers. In the Christian world, Kosovo became a tale of sacrifice. The name Miloš Obilić, possibly invented generations later, became a legend. The knight who struck down the Sultan, the last great hero of the Balkans. In Serbian folklore, the Battle of Kosovo became a myth of martyrdom, a sacred moment of national loss and divine redemption. Lazar was remembered not as a defeated general, but as a Christ-like figure, who chose the heavenly kingdom over the earthly one. In Ottoman history, Murad's death was overshadowed by Bayezid's rise. Kosovo was seen as a test, one passed through blood, betrayal, and resolve, but among historians, the battle remains ambiguous. Was it a victory? For the Bosnians, perhaps yes. For the Serbs, a tragic last stand. For the Ottomans, a Pyrrhic win at great cost. But there is one certainty: both leaders died, both armies bled, and both civilizations emerged from Kosovo changed forever. The clash on the field of Kosovo in 1389 did not end when the swords fell silent. In many ways, it never ended at all. Because Kosovo was not simply a battle of soldiers, it was and remains a battle of memory. For centuries, puts, priests, and politicians have returned to that day, shaping it, retelling it, bending it into the mirror they wanted to show their people. And each retelling asks the same question, not who won,